Hey guys, welcome to my channel. So the state responded to the defendant's motion to suppress, the Frank's motion. So I am going to read you the response. All right, so it says, state's second objection to defendant's motion to suppress. Now comes the state of Indiana. I'm going to skip the beginning. Just here. Okay, number one, that on May 19th, 2023, the defendant filed a motion to suppress the evidence seized as a result of the search warrant executed on the home of the defendant. That on September 13th, 2023, the defendant filed an amended motion to suppress the evidence seized as a result of the search warrant executed on the home of the defendant. That the defense alleges that the search warrant is unconstitutional because the issuance of the search warrant was a result of an improper ex parte application, in that the affiant, Sheriff Tony Liggett, failed to advise the judge of material faces and made false and misleading representations with reckless disregard for the truth, and that without these false and misleading representations and omissions, the search warrant would not have been issued. This is commonly referred to as a Franks v. Delaware argument from Franks v. Delaware. So 5, that per the Franks case, the defense's attack must be based on deliberate falsehood or acts of reckless disregard for the truth, and those allegations must be accompanied by an offer of proof. That the claim should point out specifically the portion of the warrant affidavit that is claimed to be false, accompanied by a statement of supporting reasons. That further, this should be supported by affidavits or sworn statements or other reliable statements from witnesses or an explanation for their absence. That the defense has filled such a memorandum outlining their beliefs of what was omitted and false. That once again, while the memorandum is colorful, dramatic, and highly unprofessional, it is not completely true. That the state believes the allegations outlined by the defense are not supported by evidence that they have collected. That Sheriff Tony Liggett did not intentionally or recklessly omit evidence or lie about evidence in the probable cause affidavit to support the search warrant. That the defense also alleges that the search warrant was unreasonable under the Indiana and federal constitution and that it lacked probable cause. That it failed to establish that the items to be seized were in the residence or could be expected to be in the residence. That the affidavit failed to provide particular information that particular items related to the particular crime would be found in the home, and that the affidavit failed to connect the generic items to actual items that were possibly used in the crime. That in September 2022, while reviewing the evidence in the investigation into the murders of Abigail Williams and Liberty German, investigators discovered an interview that was done with Richard Allen in 2017 by Indiana Conservation Officer Dan Doolin. That in the 2017 interview, Richard Allen admitted being on the trail that day that Abigail Williams and Liberty German went missing, that he stated that he was on the trail between 1:30 and 3:30 p.m., and that while he was on the trail, he was using his phone. That on October 13th, 2022, investigators invited Richard Allen and his wife, Kathy Allen, to speak to them and follow up on that interview done in 2017. That both Richard Allen and Kathy Allen came to the interview on their own on October 13th, 2022. They were not under arrest and were free to leave the interview at any time. That investigators learned from those interviews that Richard Allen reaffirmed that he was in fact on the trails that day that Abigail and Liberty German went missing, and further admitted to being on the High Bridge. That he also told investigators that he was wearing blue jeans and a blue or black Carhartt jacket with a hood, and that he was wearing a head covering. That further, Richard stated that he did own guns and that the guns were in his home. That investigators learned from Kathy that Richard Allen still had guns and knives in the home, along with a blue Carhartt jacket. That investigators believed a firearm was involved in the abduction and murder of Abigail and Liberty, because an unspent .40 caliber round was found between the bodies of Abby and Libby. That investigators believed a knife was used in the murder of Abby and Libby. That the clothes that Richard Allen described wearing the day that he was on the trails matched the description of the man seen on the bridge from the video taken by Liberty German's phone. That it was also gathered that Richard Allen still possessed the firearms, knives, and the clothing, and said items were in his house. That based on this information, investigators prepared a probable cause affidavit with a search warrant for the home of Richard Allen. that the probable cause affidavit covers all the information that law enforcement had gathered in the investigation in regards to Richard Allen up until October 13th, 2022. That the probable cause affidavit outlines evidence that established probable cause to search the home of Richard Allen. That investigators applied for the search warrant on October 13th, and the same was granted that day by Carroll County Circuit Court Judge Benjamin Diener. Investigators went to the residence of the defendant, located at 1967 North Whiteman Drive, Delphi, Indiana, knocked on the door, and executed the search warrant on October 13th, 2022. The defendant and his wife were asked to be out of the residence while the search warrant was executed, but were allowed back in the residence immediately afterwards. Investigators found several items in the residence, including a .40 caliber firearm and electronic devices, all of which were outlined in the search warrant return. That for the search warrant to be valid, it must be accompanied by an affidavit that establishes probable cause, which is a sufficient basis of facts that exist to permit a reasonable, prudent person to believe that a search warrant of the premises will uncover evidence of a crime. That Indiana Code specifies minimum information necessary to establish probable cause, which is as follows. Information particularly describing the house or place to be searched and the things to be searched for. Information alleging substantially the offense in relation thereto, and that the affiant believes and has good cause to believe that the things sought are concealed in that place that they are attempting to search, or the person to be arrested committed the offense described. And information setting forth the facts known to the affiant through personal knowledge or based on hearsay constituting probable cause. That under the Fourth Amendment of the United States Constitution, the evidence needed to obtain a search warrant need not rise to the statute of facts necessary to obtain a conviction. The circumstances alleged in the affidavit need only lead a person of reasonable caution to believe that a crime has been committed. That when the sufficiency of the search warrant is challenged under the Fourth Amendment by the defendant, as it is in the defendant's motion, the rule of the reviewing court is to simply ensure that there was a substantial basis for finding probable cause, reminding itself that it owes great deference to the initial probable cause determination, and will not invalidate a warrant by interpreting probable cause affidavits in a hyper-technical rather than a common-sense manner. Under Article 1, Section 11 of the Indiana Constitution, the reasonableness of the search is determined by using the Litchfield test, which looks at the totality of the circumstances and requires consideration of both the degree of intrusion into the subject's ordinary activities and the basis upon which the officer selected the subject of the search or seizure. That the inquiry requires a balancing of the degree of concern, suspicion, or knowledge that a violation has occurred. The degree of intrusion the method of the search or seizure imposes on citizens' ordinary activities and the extent of law enforcement needs. That the state believes that the affidavit does meet the threshold to establish probable cause under the Fourth Amendment of the United States Constitution, and that there was a substantial basis for finding probable cause, and there was a high likelihood based on the evidence that the investigators had that there was evidence of the crime in the home of Richard Allen. That the state believes that the affidavit accompanying with the search warrant for the home of Richard Allen does establish probable cause under Article 1, Section 11 of the Indiana Constitution, and does pass the Litchfield test for reasonableness under the totality of circumstances. The state believes that the affidavit establishes the items to be seized were in the residence by statements made by Richard Allen and his wife Kathy. The state believes that the affidavit provides particular information that particular items related to a particular crime will be found in the home based on the statements made by Richard and Kathy. That the state believes that the affidavit connects generic items to actual items that were possibly used in the crime based on the investigators' evidence that they gathered throughout the investigation. That the evidence that was gathered in 2017 was reaffirmed by the interview done with Richard and his wife Kathy on October 13th, 2022. Investigators believed at the time that they had enough probable cause to apply for a search warrant. Investigators believe that if they did not execute a search warrant on the residence immediately, that there was a danger that the defendant would destroy crucial evidence in the investigation. The investigators believed through their training and experience that there was a real chance that the defendant would destroy evidence once he knew he was a suspect in the crime. Wherefore, the state has shown that the actions by the officers were valid and justified, and it did not violate the defendant's Fourth Amendment under the United States Constitution or Article 1, Section 11 of the Indiana Constitution. And therefore, the motion to suppress should be denied, respectfully submitted. All right, I just wanted to read that to you.